Hello, so welcome to the licensing hearing on the 6th of May at 11 o'clock. The first item on the agenda is the election of a chair, and I understand that the subcommittee have elected Councillor Nichols, is that correct? And I'll pass over to Councillor Nichols to chair.
Thank you. Yes, I've been elected. Right, welcome everybody. Today's hearing. Just to remind everybody, this has been live broadcast and recordings will be available afterwards if you want to look back and admire yourselves. It's entirely up to yourselves. I often don't. There's no fire alarms planned, so if you hear one, straight back out the way you came. Staff will be in the front, probably leading the way out. We've got one apology for absence from Councillor Knight, and Councillor Waters is replacing Councillor Knight, who's at work. When you're speaking, if you could just press the green button, which is the MIC one, so it can pick up what you're saying. So in today's hearing, we have obviously Councillor Nichols, myself, Councillor Waters and Councillor Hook. And officers, we have Leslie, Licensing Manager, Reese, Democratic Services Officer, and Sandra Brannigan is our legal advisor, if needed, hopefully not. So we have applicant Heraty. Helen Heraty, sorry. You'll be represented by Jonathan Smith. Good. And representative Kevin Mohan, represented by Chris Gwinnett. Good. Sorry? Good morning, sorry. Any declarations of interest from us three? No? Good. Exclusion of press and public, and either way, when it comes to our deliberations, we'll exclude the press and public from this important to say. Are we all happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Minutes, which we've approved and signed the minutes, the license hearing held on the 16th of January 2025. Is any of us there? No, approved? Yeah. Good. Right. So item 7, while we're all here. So this is a determination of application for a on-state, right, the variation of a premises license in respect of Grace Court Hotel, Chapter House Street, York. Check the applicants and sign the procedure to be followed, which is, we'll go through the report from licensing, questions for the licensing officer, the applicant's case, questions for the applicant, representative case, questions for representative, representative sums up, applicant sums up, subcommittee, final points for any clarification, then we'll close and we'll go and deliberate. You will, at that point, you can stay downstairs and wait for us to come back, or you can go and wait for us to get back in touch with you. All clear? There is time limits on each section, which I'll remind you when we get to that point, 15 or 5 minutes. So, Leslie, Licensing Manager, make a report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the application for the variation of a premises licence for Grace Court, Chapter House Street, York. The variation seeks to add off sales to the of alcohol to the licence. A copy of the application can be found at Annex 1 and a copy of the current licence in force can be found at Annex 2. An overview of the circumstances in which entertainment activities are not licensable can be found at Annex 3. As part of the application, the operating schedule submitted by the applicant shows additional measures proposed under the Prevention of Public Nuisance Licensing Objective. This can be found at paragraph 13 on page 22 of the report. I can confirm that this premises is not located within the cumulative impact assessment area and that the consultation process was carried out correctly. There are no representations before you today from responsible authorities. 3 relevant representations have been received from other parties. A list of the representatives can be found at Annex 4. They believe that the licensing objective public nuisance would be undermined if this application was granted. Their representations can be found at Annex 5. A map showing the general area around the premises can be found at Annex 6. The committee has the following options when making your decision. Option 1, modify the requirements of the licence, or option 2, reject whole or part of the application. 3 agenda supplements have been published following the publication of the agenda, 1 from the representative and the other 2 are from the applicant. On the table, I have printed out larger copies of the plans that hopefully aid everybody. I've printed out page 41, which I'm sure Mr. Smith will require to explain his markings, the current licensed area, which is page 43, and then the location of the premises. So I hope that aids everybody. On another point, Chair, members will recall that the Business and Planning Act, which came into force in July 2020, the provisions of which temporarily modified the Licensing Act 2003 to allow premises that were only permitted to sell alcohol for consumption on the premises, so the on sale of alcohol, also permitted for consumption off the premises, so it allowed the off sale of alcohol. The provisions of the 2020 Act ended on the 31st of March this year. The Home Office issued amended guidance, the Section 182 guidance to licensing authorities in February this year, and paragraph 6.5 of the guidance states, if an on sale only licence holder wishes to add off sales to their licence, licensing authorities may in the first instance wish to treat applications as a minor variation, in particular when the holder took advantage of the Business and Planning Act 2020 provisions and there were no adverse impacts to the licensing objectives. Just wanted members to be aware that for the last 5 years, or just short of 5 years, unlicensed premises have been allowed to do off sales, but that has now come to an end. And I'm sure the applicant solicitor will let members know why they've made the decision to apply for a variation that is before you today. That's a brief overview of the report, Chair.
Leslie? Okay, Jonathan, any questions? Okay. Chris? Questions? Questions? Thank you, Leslie. No questions. Applicant's case then. 15 minutes. Don't feel obliged to use all of it.
Thank you. On the face of it, Councillors, it's a fairly simple application. We could have done it by way of a minor variation, but I did actually speak to your licensing team, knowing we may well have a representation from Mr. Bow, and I decided that we'd put an application in for a full variation rather than waste any time doing a minor variation. But the variation is to add off sales, councillors, to hotel residents and also to non-residents. It's limited to 23:30 to non-residents because that's the time that we're limited on the licence for the sale for consumption on the premises, and 24 hours for residents. It is limited, the circumstances that we want to sell the alcohol, and it's in the application, limited to sealed containers if it's being taken out from the grounds of the hotel. So that'll be if you bought a bottle of wine with your meal and you've got the wine list with the food lists as well. You might want to take your bottle of wine with you if you've not finished it. And so that's the reason we've asked for sealed containers to non-residents. And also then the application includes also consumption of alcohol in the yellow areas, councillor. So that yellow area in open containers. That is our land, councillors. That is a land we own. It's not shared land, it is owned and it forms part of the hotel grounds. It's subject to 7 conditions I propose. I don't really want to read all of those through to you, other than the fact that alcohol will be sold in the sealed containers if it's for consumption off the grounds. We will not be encouraging anybody to drink alcohol in that yellow area, other than possibly with a photography shoot. If you've got an event, a function, a wedding, and you want to raise a glass of bubbly, that you can do so in the yellow area. And then there's various signage that we've already put in place, and that's suggested at conditions 3, 4, and 5. And then there's my counting, councillors. We've gone straight to number 7 without number 6 in there. So there's various signs that we're going to display, and are actually all are there already, apart from the coach house display, because the coach house has not yet actually been converted into hotel bedrooms. So that's part of the application. We'd also ask councillors for you to remove condition 9, which is on the licence. It's not on the form, the application form, but condition 9, which is drinking glasses of any type shall not be allowed to enter or leave the licensed area. Because if we're going to, with your blessing, have permission for off sales, that condition would need to come off, otherwise it would be inconsistent with the grant. So that's the application. Do you know Grays Court Hotel, councillors? We've sent to you, I've sent to you. Do you know it? Do I need to explain? Have you been there? Yeah, so you can see the garden, you can see the hotel. It is a very nice independently owned hotel that Helen's had and has owned it now for and opened it for 15 years. You can see all of the awards that she has won as a result of operating this hotel. They're all disclosed to you at page 5 of your supplemental bundle. Suffice to say, it's got Michelin Guide listed, Rosette. She's very proud of the AA Breakfast Award, which I experienced this morning. Shortlisted for a boutique hotel, a boutique restaurant of the year in 2022. You can see all of the accolades that they've got there in the on page 5. And I've also sent you a copy of the menu and also the drinks list to give you an idea what it's like. I've also given you a link to the hotel website, but I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop there about the hotel itself because it is a narrow application, this, councillors, of what we're asking for. Why are we doing it? Yes, because the off-sales easement, as I call it, that's the relaxation, came to an end at the end of March 2025. It was originally in place from the 22nd of July 2020, so for nearly 5 years, premises were allowed to sell off sales where they only had an on-sales permission. And during this time, there have been no issues. There's been no complaints, no issues with the police, environmental health. Residents have not complained about anybody drinking alcohol within that yellow area, councils, or indeed taking alcohol with them from the restaurant and drinking it from a sealed container when they get home, so that they take their wine with them. So we've had that permission, but it's come to an end, councillor. So that's why we put the application in today. And the scenarios, why have we done it, councillors? Well, first of all, it is to take the wine with you, as I've explained. I'm not going to go into that again. But looking at the plan, and you've seen the videos, I understand, of the walk from the hotel up the stairs, but also from the front of the hotel into the garden. Have you seen both of those videos? I believe you have. So the walk from the hotel, you would go through, if you were going from the hotel into the garden, not through the hotel, but through the driveway, you would go out to the front of the hotel, which is to the left of the words Grays Court. You turn left through what looks like the letter N, but is actually the letter Z. That's the gate. And then you would go into the driveway, and then you would turn left through the letters W to get into the walled garden. And that is one way that you can take your alcohol into the walled garden. If you were to stop now, following the 31st of March, in the yellow area and took a sip of your alcohol on the way through the gate, you would be drinking alcohol that's been sold for you for consumption on the premises, but you're drinking it off the premises, because the licensed premises themselves are the areas you see edged in red, which is the hotel plus the walled garden. That's all licensed, plus the coach house. And the courtyard. So I should add, yes, the courtyard. So everything in the Grays Court that is in the square around the Grays Court, that is all of the courtyard and the parking. That is all licensed as well. That's one option of walking. The other option is to go through the hotel as well. Now that's already all licensed. So you go up the stairs, and you've seen that, and you go through what's called the long room, then down the stairs into the garden. That's the other way you can do it. Now we can do that now because that is all a licensed area. So that's just on sales. But first of all, if you've got a pram, that's not ideal, or a pushchair. It's not ideal if you are infirm, and it's not ideal if you're in a wheelchair. But also, very importantly, if we have weddings, we have the wedding breakfast set up in the long room. Now, the long room is, as you come out of the stairs, you will have, as you go through the long room and then you come to the stairs, and both the sweeping stairs down in the garden, that's the long room you just walk through. Now, if I've got a wedding and a wedding breakfast, that table is all set up for up to 40 guests for a wedding. And if I'm a bride, or even a groom, probably the bride, I don't want everybody walking past my wedding breakfast. I want everybody to go into the garden and come up these lovely staircase into the long room where my wedding breakfast is set up. Otherwise, everybody's got to push past the table, go down the stairs into the garden. Now, I'm sure Chris will say, you don't mind me calling Chris, no. We've known each other long enough, that Chris will say, well, you just leave your drinks and it'll be taken up to the long room for you. Well, if you've got a wedding and you've got 40 people there, and it's a close-knit do, you want to be able to take your drinks with you. But we don't want people hanging around in the yellow area, and that's why we will not encourage any drinking there in that area. There's no furniture there, there's no tables, there's no chairs, and we will not put any out councillors. We've been doing that, and we've been able to do that for the last 4.5 years. Indeed, during COVID, I think that gate was actually open because do you remember the time that you could only drink outside? Of course, this was a lovely garden where you could sit and you could have a drink. It was lovely, and we could sit in there and people could come out and have a drink. So people were sat there during COVID, but they never sat in the yellow area, councillors. And then the other scenario we envisage is when the coach house is converted and got bedrooms in there, and you want to take your drink from the hotel to your bedroom, and you've just bought a drink, we want people to be able to carry it along the yellow area into their room. So that's the reason for the application, councillors. Dealing briefly some other representations, Mr. Helen Owens, his representation is on page 63. They say that, she says, guests could consume alcohol outside until the early hours. Well, we don't have any guests consuming it in the garden. People don't drink in the late hours, yet there's no restriction on when we can drink in the garden, but they don't drink in there. We've actually offered to put a point Y, you can see at the back of the coach house, there'll be some secure access, so people cannot actually access a little area at the back where the Owens' windowsill is to their kitchen. So we're going to actually close that off. She suggested some restrictions that we might want to agree to, putting signage in the coach house not to take any drinks outside because it is licensed. We're happy to do that, and I've got some additional conditions I'll hand in at the end, which I've already passed to Chris. As she said, guests wouldn't want to take any drinks back to their room from the hotel. Well, we wouldn't want that, council. That's the whole point. If you bought a drink in the hotel and you want to take it back to your room in the coach house, we want the opportunity to do that. She mentions that it's not acceptable to license the yellow area, to actually license for on sales. That's quite right. The decision back in 2018, and Mr. Maham mentions it as well, is that we couldn't, had we licensed the yellow area actually for on sales, so the whole thing was on sales, we could have taken the benefit of the Live Music Act. I'm sure your solicitor will touch on that, but that would have meant that you could have had recorded amplified music played in that area. But we've not done that. We've purposefully excluded that area from the application for on sales and just asked for off sales. And Helen Owens, as does Mr. Moen, mentions the fact that you could have effectively creating a late off licence in the City of York. Well, there's no police representation. The cheapest bottle of wine here is £39. Are you going to take a 39 bottle of wine without any glasses and start supping it underneath somebody's windowsill? Or are you going to go to Tesco Express on Goodrham Gate and buy yourself an £8 bottle of wine where you can drink it in the street? It's nonsense to suggest that that could happen. And we've had this permission for 4.5 years already, and there's been no suggestion we've got any street drinkers coming out of the Grays Court Hotel. There's Mr. Moen's representation. There's a lot of history in there, councillors. A lot of history, a lot of reference to music events, including a video you've seen about music noise. We're talking about off sales here, councillors. We're talking about permission for limited off sales into that yellow area and in sealed containers away from the hotel. Mr. Mers sensibly sets out an analysis of the Business and Planning Act, which I imagine Chris may well have done for him, and does say that we've been entitled to use this benefit from the Business and Planning Act as a result of not having off sales, and that's quite correct. He then says that we were exploiting this permission. We were using a permission that every pub in the country had that only had on sales. And had we been exploiting it, councillors, we would have had people during the height of the pandemic when you could only drink outside. We'd have had people sat outside in this yellow area with tables and chairs. We could have had a pop-up bar inside the licensed area. Could be serving people outside into that yellow area. We never did. We didn't do that, councillors. We've maintained that buffer, because I think that's what Mr. Moen references, a buffer between his house, which is at number 8, and also the hotel grounds. We've also never taken the full advantage of the Live Music Act. Within the yellow area, whilst it's not red lined, I'm sure your solicitor will advise you, we could play live music, whether it's amplified or unamplified. We could play live music in that yellow area, but we haven't done so. Again, we maintain the privacy as far as we can of Mr. Moen, who does live at number 8. We've not taken full advantage of either the Business and Planning Act or the Live Music Act by creating an area where we're having lots of events going on and people sat around drinking alcohol, even though we could. So I've explained the scenarios, and Mr. Moen mentions the 2 scenarios. He mentions the committee has always wanted to maintain the buffer between his house and the walled garden. As I've explained, that buffer is still there. Again, Mr. Moen references alcohol being taken away on sealed containers and drank in the streets. Once again, I reference the fact, no representation from the police and the cost of doing so if you're a guest who's decided to come for a very expensive meal in the restaurant and then take a bottle of wine to swig on the way home. So the solution that Mr. Moen comes up is to have a notice on the gate to the driveway, no drinks beyond this point. Well, that would stop then people taking drinks back to the coach house as and when it's converted. And more importantly, it would stop people taking drinks into the garden if they're attending an event and the organisers don't want them to walk through that long route. Mr. Moore suggests that the gate is a new route. Well, it's not a new route. It's been used for functions and events over the last 4.5 years. And it was used during COVID as well, that gate, when people could only drink outside. Sorry? It's been used since we've opened in one format or another. And we did not include a request for off sales in our 2023 application. Mr. Mayor references, no, we didn't, because at the time there was permission for off sales on sales premises only. And the government had just extended that actually to run to the end of 2025. And there was every possibility they may have given that forever and a day. And had I made that application on behalf of Helen, I'm sure she wouldn't like it if I'd wasted her time and money on something the government ended up making permanent. We've no intention of having people drinking 24 hours a day in the yellow area or the walled garden. We don't do it now, councillors, and we're actively going to discourage people to take any drinks into that yellow area. We have ropes and we have signage already that says no drinks beyond that point. I think Mr. Mo's sent you a video from some music played. He says in May 2024, we can categorically say it was from Bank Holiday Monday in May 2023. It is about music. It's not about off sales, so I will be very brief on this. It was a New York brass band. It has to be said, louder than we would want, and we won't be using them again. It was 2 50-minute sets in the garden. We've had other acoustic. It wasn't amplified. There was no amps going on. It was a brass band, and it was in the afternoon. 2 50-minute sets. Helen Owens did complain, and we did listen to the music, and then we replied to Helen Owens as to when it would end. As far as we can find, we don't have a complaint from Mr. Moen about that music. We tried to discuss this application with Mr. Moen before we issued the application. Indeed, I said to Chris at the last hearing we attended about this hotel, let's try and resolve this if we can between ourselves amicably, because council's the only people who benefit from this hearing, quite frankly, Chris and I, through our fees. I emailed Chris on a couple of occasions. I think Chris was struggling to get instructions from Mr. Moen to see if we could actually resolve this amicably. Sadly, we couldn't. There was no attempt to discuss the application and the limits that we've agreed to put on it. And so I'm afraid we find ourselves here today. I've got these other conditions. If there were 2 others, one of which Helen Owens suggested or Mr. Moen suggested, could I just pass them round to your councillors? I think Chris has seen them, if that's okay with you. So these are in addition to the conditions that I've already put forward, councillors. Thank you. Am I within 15 minutes?
Just leave all questions. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
When the examples that you gave for transporting alcohol from the courtyard through point Z and into the garden area W and then presumably back at the hotel, that was always linked to events in your representation. Are you proposing to limit it to just occasions when events are taking place?
It'll be events, conferences. Oh, sorry. Yes, it will be events and conferences. There's no intention to have that gate open on a permanent basis. We can't have the gate on a permanent basis for security reasons, councillors. So yes, it would be events, conferences. We did have it open during COVID, though, I should say. That was open generally during COVID when people could only drink outside.
That's all my questions. So again, just want that clarification on it. So it's for events that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's always locked at night, I should explain, councillors. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Questions, councillors?
I don't think so.
Yeah, just in terms of the access on the yellow shaded area, whether it's licensed or not, I'm assuming that it's still available for people pushing prams or in wheelchairs to use, irrespective of the licensing.
Yeah, yes, so it is part of the hotel grounds. If you've been to it, it's a very nice drive. It has nice flowers and vegetables growing and nice strawberries and all sorts of things growing. Yes, it is open to the guests staying at the hotel, whether it's licensed or not.
So am I right in assuming that if anybody in a wheelchair or pushing a pram was in the garden, there will be some form of waiter or waitress service available to them if they needed a drink, rather than them having to physically carry their own drinks.
It's all table service.
Right, thank you.
Just to stress, councillor, there's no tables or chairs in that yellow area, and that's what's been offered in one of the conditions.
Cool. Just on the access, you say it's only during events. So is there a point when it gets so busy that you do open the gates? If there was, you know, you may have a lot of people booked in that you didn't know was expected as a group. Is it just if you have to sort of when you book, you request the gate is open for people to get there?
Yeah, so we would know in advance that they wanted to access the long room, which is the room inside. We would know in advance that they wanted to access that through the double sets of staircase. We know that in advance, and therefore the gate would be open in advance for them. And the maximum capacity we can have for an event or function, because it's on the license, this was the subject to the last hearing, is 40 people, so that's the maximum number.
Once people are in the garden, do you then, you say it's table service, but do they, if they want to, can they wander back in either way, or is it you would expect them to come back through the gate and back to the yellow area? Back
we control it, so we would either have the gates to the city wall open, which we do less and less because we don't really need to. Ideally, they would come through the hotel so that we know how many people we've got, where they sat, and we can keep tabs on them. We don't want to lose people or not give them good service. But we do open the gates if somebody they can't manage the stairs. It's a lot of stairs up and down, and elderly people. And if they get to the end of the drive, there is a sloping path that they can get through. And then there is an outside toilet, which has got disabled access.
I think to answer your question, if people were drinking at the front, so there's a bar, a lovely cosy bar as you walk in, or you could drink in the courtyard at the front. If it was an event or function and people had then gone through, everybody had gone through into, once all the guests were into the garden, at that point then, unless somebody was then in a tram or with a wheelchair, etc., that gate would then be closed for that function because everybody would then be in the garden.
Will it be exclusive? We don't want anybody else walking in.
Yeah, because it's exclusive use, isn't it? Sorry, I should add that if you've got a function here for 40 people, it's exclusive use of the hotel. There's nobody else using the hotel but hotel guests.
And in terms of off sales, you said, you know, it's £39 your cheapest wine. So do you not get people just coming in for a drink on the way into town or enjoying a night out? Or is it generally, it's not a hotel for non-residents, really?
You do get people coming in, yeah, you get people coming in and they can drink there till 11:30, but I have restricted councillors by way of a condition that any off sales that is going outside the grounds of the hotel would have to be in a sealed container. So you couldn't take your pint glass out with you and start wandering down the street with it. You'd have to pass reception anyway, so you'd be seen doing that, councillor.
Cool. You happy? Yeah. Cool. Thank you. That's the end of the questions yourselves. We shall now hear from Chris as from the rep centre.
Good morning. Just a couple of points from Jonathan's presentation, which I'm just picking out, is that the requirement appears to be connected to events taking place at the premises more than general day-to-day. That's an important clarification for my client. I'll check with instructions whether they ultimately change their view, but that's an important clarification, and we would expect to see that on the license if you were minded to grant it to that effect. Both ways, with the via the courtyard or the garden, they are stepped access both ways. I appreciate that. And it was interesting from the applicant that when they wanted this permission to use for exclusive events, that the people at the hotel were all attending the event. So it's not like you and I wandering through somebody else's wedding through the hotel, which I could understand why people would take offence at that. But it's more general, and the people are all attending for aesthetic reasons. The guidance that Leslie read at the outset about this going for a minor variation would be a suitable route, in particular if the holder took advantage of the Business and Planning Act. Before Jonathan spoke, we did want to kind of query that, because our understanding is that it hasn't been regularly used at all during the last 5 years. And that seems to be confirmed by Jonathan to an extent as well, that it's for these occasional events. And the videos that Jonathan provided, I believe it's his client is the narrator on that. I did notice that the gate at the top of the drive at Point Z, I think the express is usually padlocked, is how it's described. So my client, when they saw this application, was a bit puzzled by it. And as Jonathan pointed out, he and I benefited in fees, very reasonable fees, worth every penny, of course. But it is an expensive process for what seems to be a very narrow point. The coach house at the bottom of the driveway, although has permission to be developed, is licensed. When it was licensed, it was my client's understanding it was for the purpose of on sales only. That is the current position through things like mini bars or alcohol placed in the coach house by the hotel. Now we're talking about off sales and off sales to that area. We're glad that the applicant has offered no tables and chairs outside. That would mean that people are less likely to stand outside and drink. But that is still an issue that my client has concern with, especially with the coach house, which could be occupied. When it's occupied and opened, I think up to 14 people could be there. And on a summer's evening could stand outside instead of being in their own rooms. Could stand outside together with other people in their party and drink technically 24/7. So if you were minded to grant, again, our preference is that you wouldn't, that a curfew on off sales within the ground might be a sensible use as well. I appreciate what Mr. Smith said, is that that's not a current requirement. But I think it is a real risk, especially with the coach house area where people are away from the hotel and direct observation, might be in a party with other people in the room and could find themselves outside till the early hours. Just to give you a fuller insight on the plan with the yellow driveway, Mr. Mohan here his property is this one, number 8. If I just ring that and pull that up, so his property is this one here, and the driveway has been kept as a sort of sterile area in earlier applications where it has been considered directly on more than one occasion. I think by my count about at least 3 directly, and the conditions applied to the licence by earlier committees, by this committee, but constituted with different members. The first and second condition, and I'm going to suggest in priority, I appreciate number 1 isn't the top condition, but the first condition applied to the licence is that area couldn't become part of the unlicensed area. I appreciate it's not part of the application, but specifically excluded, that barrier and buffer between the residents and the hotel activities in a very quiet part of York. York is a beautiful city, as you all know, and has lots of areas which can be both business areas very close to residential areas, and in the shadow of the Minster, it is a particularly beautiful and quiet area most of the time. And therefore, noise from business activities such as the hotel, from its garden, etc. Your earlier committees have considered and felt that area, that buffer, is necessary. Again, the second condition, prohibiting off sales or consumption outside of the coach house, is the second condition. Only consumption within the coach house was a matter. And we appreciate the applicant can return to the committee and ask the same question again in slightly different phrased way. But we would hope that there would be some material change that they could rely upon to point to. And Mr. Smith, Jonathan, has said repeatedly that this easement existed for 5 years, but I think the correct position is it's been used sporadically through those 5 years, and the conditions and the change proposed currently is much more relaxed and would allow anybody to take drinks, whether at an event or otherwise, from the courtyard to the garden. It becomes an issue, of course, only if you have a drink while you're in the courtyard. So if you take a seat in the courtyard and you're served a drink and then you would like to then move to the garden, it becomes an issue only at that stage. Currently, the licence would permit you to enter the courtyard. If the gate was open, move through the gate and into the garden. That without a drink, that's not an issue. We feel that's a benefit because there's less reason for you to stop if you're moving to your final destination to take a seat and to have a drink. That's where you're heading to the garden. You're more likely to go there directly and quickly without causing an issue. I think the gate is locked, and from Mr. Mohan's point of view, it offers additional security for him and the side of his property. The lead on his roof and property has been taken a few times. We're not suggesting anything to do with the hotel, but the locked gate is obviously an advantage there. And anecdotally, we understood the gate would prevent people from trespassing into the hotel and down to the coach house, which is currently under development. These are all benefits. The application's narrative, though, focuses in detail about the transport of alcohol from the courtyard to the garden, and that's the justification for this, for us all to be here this morning, for all the reading that you've done over the weekend, the bank holiday weekend, for us all to be here, is to deal with this fairly narrow point, and further narrowed in Jonathan's presentation to 2 events further. Of course, the coach house, expressly mentioned in there, it isn't operational at the moment. Progress hasn't been visible for 3 years. I'm sure that the hotel is seeking to get that online as soon as practicable, but it isn't operational, and from our view, it doesn't appear to be on the verge of becoming so. As I say, a lot of the statutory easement has been in there in 5 years, and Ms Cook was reading the guidance exactly correctly. There is the proviso if they particularly took advantage of it and therefore had that evidence that there is an issue. We don't think, and we see no evidence produced today to that effect. In the additional information provided by the applicant, obviously the video referring to the padlock gate, and then the images that are provided by the applicant in the additional supplementary evidence from page 33 to 42. I think in almost each of those pictures, possibly bar one, you can see either a rope gate, my terminology, or a metal gate preventing people from travelling that direction. That seems to be a very clean and effective way of stopping people moving across that area, as opposed to the proposal as it is now to put notices up suggesting that you can go across there, but please read our notice, because if you're carrying a drink, we'd like you not to drink. But if you do drink, don't really worry, because we're just encouraging you not to drink. And if you do drink, you're not breaching the licence because we have off sales. Seems like a kind of convoluted way of dealing with an issue. If the applicant had put the application forward about events and specific needs in that requirement, we don't want to spoil brides' events and days, but that's not how it's previously been described. And it's also interesting that, of course, it's not about general people traipsing through your wedding, it's your own wedding guests. I can remember at my wedding there were people I didn't want there, but I couldn't object them to them really, because I had invited them. We have looked at the conditions as proposed and in the application, and Jonathan, for quite rightly appreciating that you had read them out at page 31. But we do feel that they carry or have very sort of few teeth to actually affect the behaviour on that area. It has been excluded. We have been, and this committee has, in efforts, prevented people from consuming alcohol in that area. And that has been effective, and we are grateful to the committee over the last number of years. We feel that the signage suggested doesn't carry the same weight or have the same effectiveness. We think that the measures in place at the moment, which the hotel are acknowledging properly, sort of adjudicating with their rope gates and gates, they're managing that effectively. The net effect is that area is currently a almost sterile buffer between residents and the hotel, and it's something that we've greatly prized. As I say, that has been recognised by the committee previously. Mr. Jonathan did point out the historic nature of our of some of the history in my client's representation, but at page 96, when you retire to consider the decision, the second paragraph on that talks about the L-shaped driveway and the fear and acknowledges that it is a concern about the use of that area. I appreciate in that instance it's about licensing it for on sales and this is off sales, but The issue is keeping it and maintaining it as a sterile area. With respect, I don't think that Mr. Smith or the applicant has brought forward any sort of salient facts or real changes in the last, since this last was considered by the committee, suggesting that something has changed materially to allow us to now operate that area in a different manner. As I say, no material changes in essence, and without wanting to irritate you by repeating again and again the same points, we have kept that area clear. It's not an area that's regularly used from the hotel. It seems to us to be an extraordinary sort of effort to allow for those very narrow matters to go forward. But we would ask that the off sales are not permitted. We have listened to Mr. Smith in respect of off sales generally from the premises, and I take the point that if you were looking for an off license, the hotel is probably not going to compete effectively with other off licenses in the town. But it's off license transporting within site that is our main concern with the application. We prefer, if possible, to prevent people from carrying drinks across that area, which we think would lead to people either drinking in that area unobserved or lingering and making more and additional noises. And the permission is going till 11:30 at night, that we can allow those communications to go forward. We do appreciate very much the committee has given us that barrier, and we'd ask you to maintain it. As appears to have been happening for 10 years before the easement, people were transported through the hotel and through the long room. Now, during the easement, during events, I don't know if each event, but a number of events by that way, it seems to be insufficient to change the conditions that are there, the protections that you're giving, and the protections that you've recognised are necessary and proportionate in the past.
Well, there's no RAM. Basically, the coach house is early. The planning's run out. A bit of a pipe dream, you know, in my mind. There was always a lock on the gate for a reason, because of security. Our house has been burgled twice, lead stolen twice. I think Helen herself, the lawnmower stolen. We had when the gates were left open, we had homeless people and druggies sleeping in the coach house when it was when the gates were open. A lot for a reason. There's no rhyme or reason. The easiest way is you go up the stairs, go down the back stairs, and you know, and if I suppose if we had to give anything, that there should be just a license behind the property. It doesn't point out on this plan how big our garden is. You haven't put that separately, but it's a massive garden we have, which backs on to Grace Court on both sides. You know, potentially the music video, we didn't supply, actually. It was our Helen neighbour, the Helen, which is further away from our property. Ours is close to Grace Court. And this will be, if they did have music, which they potentially could down the driveway, it would be even louder. Jonathan says there, you know, it's only 50 minutes, but as a family, you sat there listening, you know, reading Sunday papers or Saturday papers. Do you want to hear that noise next door on a weekend? It could potentially happen every weekend. And at the moment, it's been to the committee 5 times. You've refused it 5 times. God knows why we're here again.
And just to cover, we have produced the video as part of our representation, but it was taken by our neighbour. So just to clarify on that point. And just off my final point is the issues about noise, I appreciate, aren't linked to the application today. The issues about deliveries aren't linked to the application today. However, every time that my client does appear before the committee, we raise these issues, we flag them to the premises, and we often get statements of addressing those and working forward, but they are never dealt with in our period adequately. The hotel, it seems determined to want to operate in a way it sees fit, and continue to do so. And unfortunately, the suggestion of these changes will come and we can be trusted. My client, for reasons described, have concerns about that because persistent issues do persist.
Approach from the beginning, apply for 7 rooms and 14 rooms, a license and a wedding license, and it keeps going on and on and on, and then it's got to stop somewhere. Yesterday morning at 5:45, there was a van that pulled up outside our property. I went down in my dressing gown. Bloody hell, what are you doing here at this time? I went, oh, it's food waste for Grace Court. I said, well, can't you, it's bank holiday Monday. Can't you come, a bit later? Well, there's no advice on the notes or whatever. I mean, the hotel got a 1-star rating, after the last committee meeting. It gets 1-star rating because of poor management. It can build itself up to be anything. But in my eyes, just look at the 1-star rating, and it causes, there's about 4 or 5 points to looks out, and it comes back to the management of the hotel itself.
Thank you. Questions?
You've raised that we don't address any issues. I'm trying, councillors, to bring this back to the application in hand here, which is about off sales. What issues have you raised specifically about concerns of people drinking, and any evidence that this has happened in the past of people drinking in the yellow area, Mr. Moen? Because you say you've raised these issues, what are you doing about them? I'm trying to bring us back to the application today, because your objection goes on for pages and pages about historical. The committee are considering one aspect of an application. What issues have you raised about the subject matter of our application today?
Before you started, there was a lady that took your place. I forget her name. I think she's retired. I've raised various issues with the noise people.
Sorry to stop you. About I'm asking about off sales.
Well, there's people when you've been having 21st parties or Heraty house or 25th parties, people have been coming out with the bottles. We have to clear bottles up outside our house while they wait for taxis, and then we've cleared all the bottles out in the morning. It hasn't happened as often, to be fair, but it's there and it could happen again. And if we complain to the authorities, i.e. the council, they can't just come out of it. They only work on a Friday and Saturday until 9, until 3 a.m. in the morning. And if I phone them up, which I have done previously, I've stood there in my dressing gown waiting for them to come. Could be an hour, 2 hours. You have to prioritise everything. By the time they get there, all the noise has stopped.
When did that? When did that? No, I'd like to know when did it happen. Sorry, when did it happen?
Can the chair the meeting? Mr. Milan answer the question. I'm sure the chair and the committee are very well capable of discerning what we think is relevant and not to. I think this should be allowed to answer until the chair.
Chair, could you ask the detail of these dates then? Through you.
Yes. Sorry.
No, it's just.
All right.
In terms of the issues that you raised, in terms of the people drinking outside, the noise, etc., while they're waiting, have you any specific dates, or did you call the police?
We're going back, but you go to the council in real estate and they say make sheets. So make sheets, write down the times and dates. Then you phone them up. If they don't have the evidence themselves, by the time they come,
so yeah,
it's very. I mean, Jonathan, he's very clever to say we haven't got any evidence, but we have contacted the council. The council come out. But they can't, we can't, they come out, so well, and they've gone. So there's no proof from my side. So it's like the chicken and the egg. I'm in the middle to prove something, but it's come and gone. It's that quickly. The noise people, if it's 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, which it has been previously, they've got other things to privatise. Not Mr. Grumpy Moan phoning up, is it him again? But it's annoying. I'm woken up yesterday. For instance, the place is getting busier and busier with the traffic. There's a laundry van. Helen promised, oh, it does not there. It's there. You go tomorrow. It'll be there for an hour. You've got people coming round to the Minster trying to drop the guests, the people off at the guest house. It's there for an hour.
Yeah, but the laundry vans is not part of the application.
Oh, sorry. But just little things.
No, the thing is, I appreciate. You get frustrated that nothing happens, but if you're not phoning in and recording it, then we're left with.
Well, sorry, I can record it. I've offered to fit recording things to my property, but the council don't accept it as in their legislation. I've asked the council to supply because they do have the noise equipment, but when we've ever wanted it, it's not available. So again, we go back to square one.
And just in terms of annoying you, and the police obviously haven't put any submissions in, have you ever had the need to call the police over any incidents, fighting, noise?
The police, when they stole the lead, yes.
Right.
Yeah. There's been a window smash next door, fighting. I haven't seen any fighting, no, just drunk people, having a good time, you know, but we're a city centre, we're a very quiet residential area. And we've got to, I understand you've got to balance the business against residential. There's been, since this last committee meeting, there's been at Church House, there's 14 more flats being built. So that's another 28 people. And and there's more and more traffic coming round. You know, we get
But again, that's,
sorry.
I get your frustration of everything
sorry.
else that goes on, but it's not part of this. In terms of any more questions?
Mr. Moan, you mentioned bottles being left out, smashed, noise. Why don't you mention any of that in your representation?
Because we're going back a few years. Recently, there hasn't been, Jonathan, but if we go back, the place is getting busier and busier. And this is allowed at the Coach House. I mean, the planning's run out. You know, they have to reapply for planning again. That's going to be another 9 months. To build, it's going to be 500,000 or 600,000 to build. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. I'm worried about if the council do approve this, it could be flogged tomorrow morning. It could be sold, and we're left with a legacy. What's left?
And just to be clear, that video then is not your video. It's the video of Helen Owens, I think. Is it a video taken in your garden or in their garden?
Helen's garden is further away from ours. So ours is actually 80 yards closer. So that noise would have been a lot worse than it was. We weren't around at the time, to be fair, Jonathan. So she supplied it. I asked her, can we supply it to the committee? And she said that was fine. So I did ask her for permission. But you know, she's having the same problems as us. She's having her work done on the house at the moment. Otherwise, she'd be here, moaning like I am or complaining. Thank you.
Do you accept that video is actually from May 23? Because there is actually some documentation with an email complaint to reception from Helen Owens on the 27th. It's the 27th of May 23. You don't accept that?
It was last year because our nephew was in our house at the time, and he said it was the same day.
Okay.
You've got one in May.
Any more questions?
There's some other points of clarification.
We'll get on something
I'm
else.
sure we'll be interested in that. I'll leave that as something.
Councillors? Councillor Watt?
Just either you or your client, just to confirm that you don't have a problem with use of the yellow area solely for access, especially by people in wheelchairs, the elderly or prams.
Oh, absolutely. Now, the issue that we'd have is just, we think that people carrying drinks through there are a lot more likely to linger and be longer, and the nuisance arising for that. But certainly for disability access and to make people access through, there's no issue. And that's not an issue in the licence as it currently stands. That would already be permitted.
Okay. Councillor Right, we shall move on to summing up then. And Chris to go first. We'll go back in reverse order.
Well, obviously, I appreciate, I've just made many of my points already. So we believe that the off-sale provision across that area, it seems to be an extraordinary sort of effort to get that ability to go. That's not really the measure of the application, of course. Jonathan and his clients are entitled to make any application that they wish, irrespective of what we may think is a sledgehammer to crack a nut or otherwise. Sorry, I could just
I think there's a possible compromise, and I suppose we put that forward.
Having listened to what Jonathan has said about it, if you were minded to grant, our preference is that it isn't granted, and that's my client's kind of reserved position. But if you were minded to grant it, we would ask that communication between the courtyard or off sales from the courtyard to the garden with alcohol be limited to private events only, and not generally as such. In addition to that, we would not wish to restrict, but we would accept off sales from the garden to the coach house. That would be obviously unreasonable to prevent people from doing that. We would, however, like to see if you did permit off sales, and I'm confident that, and your legal advisor will confirm that you can condition the use of curfew areas that are not part of the licensed area. I don't think that's hopefully not an issue in dispute, but we'd like to see off sales across that area limited. My client would suggest 9 PM would be reasonable. Therefore, people outside of the coach house wouldn't be permitted to drink outside the coach house after 9 PM. We have suggested that there's no tables and chairs placed on the yellow area. I'm very grateful to the applicant for agreeing that. Obviously, from the plan at page 41, that yellow area includes immediately outside the coach house, so tables and chairs would not be permissible out there either. Having heard and been persuaded by Jonathan's arguments about off sales for part drunk bottles of wine, etc., being taken home, that we would have no issue with that, and up to 11:30 for that element of off sale. It's the off sales across that buffer area that we are most concerned about. So what we'd like to see is those limited to essentially 9 PM for people resident at the coach house or for events across that area. Preferably events that were, it's a matter for the committee whether you see that as an accessibility issue of us, but that'd be very hard to sort of deal with. And we also we think that these conditions could be quite easily dealt with by the existing infrastructure there, i.e. the gates and the rope gates that are already there to maintain that. We did suggest a number of people in our representation and suggested it's 6 for that. Again, trying to keep it at a minimum, but again, having heard if the committee were minded to limit it to such events and to people resident in the coach house, then the number perhaps doesn't come an issue. I did wonder why Taylor and Manchester had been inserted and then figured it out with your major representation. If you are minded to grant it, we don't have any objection to condition 9 being removed about glassware across that point of the area or being taken off, as Mr. Smith. Was it for the review point? I thought it was the alteration. No, this doesn't. Yeah. Sorry, legal point on that. So we're not trying to be unreasonable about the application, but there is, and the committees in the past have recognised that the use of that area generally should be restricted as much as possible to allow a buffer between the premises, legal, operational, business activities and the premises. And we don't think there is a material change to that before the committee at the moment. The coach house is already being considered. Access between the garden and the courtyard has already been considered. The only issue now that apparently hasn't been considered is brides not wanting people to go through their long room, which is a point, but a material point that outweighs my client's protection from potential nuisance. And absolutely, the videos, the talk about noise, that goes, in my view, to the conduct of the premises historically in relation to its neighbours and how we feel that the hotel has treated that and how that continues. We do fully accept that they are not directly linked to the application point of off sales, but it is to do with the conduct of the premises and how that has been in the past. Obviously, I've advised my client and they're aware of their right to review a licence if an issue did arise in the future. But my client has tried to live with the decisions of the committee and to live with the premises as best as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jonathan,
just on a general point, it's a shame that I think we're fairly close between ourselves. It's a shame, really, quite frankly, Chris, that we didn't sit down back in February and try to sort this out without wasting everybody's time here. But anyway, I suspect you couldn't get your client's instructions to that effect. Just on one point of clarification about being linked to events, the use of the yellow area from the gate to the garden, that is in terms of the actual use of the gateway. So the gateway is usually only used for an event. It's used if you want to park your car, we'll open it and somebody can park the car up there because there's another 6 or 7 car parking spaces up there, but that's not to do with the alcohol. But typically, if we were allowing any number of people through that gate, yes, it would be an event or a function. However, and this is the slight difficulty we have is, as I've said before, if somebody is infirm, in a wheelchair, with a pram, we also want the opportunity to allow them through that gate, and they may have a drink in their hand. And that's the difficulty I think I have in agreeing it's only with functions or events. You've heard me say verbally, you've heard me say at this hearing, that's what it's generally used for. That's the gateway access. And I do thank Chris for acknowledging that, yes, you could also have the yellow area used for off sales to the coach house. He suggested a restriction of 2100. We could actually have people, is there evidence that people would drink and use this area? There's no furniture and there's no chairs in this area. If I'm going to have a drink on my way to the coach house, having left the hotel, I'm going to sit in the garden, which if you've seen it is gorgeous from the city walls. There's tables and chairs in there. I'm going to sit there. I'm not going to go to the driveway where there's no tables and chairs. I'd have to sit on the floor. So if you feel it appropriate to put a curfew, and the curfew should only be for the yellow area, councillors, and I think Chris would acknowledge that, because you're not here to review the red area, which we've already got a licence for. I would suggest 2300 is the appropriate curfew. And the reason I say that, councillors, is because under the Business and Planning Act at the moment, the permission for off sales runs, or did until the 31st of March, it ran until 11 p.m. So that would be your appropriate time to mirror what we used to have. Chris says it's not being used, or it's being used sporadically, the permission. It's being used on functions, events. It's being used for individuals who will find it hard to access the garden through the house. But it has been used, and I stress again, when we were all just drinking outside, councillors, because this must have been one of the nicest gardens, I imagine, in the whole of York, where you could enjoy an alcoholic drink. So it has been used in some intensity during the COVID period as well, without complaint. Planning permission on the coach house, just as a matter of record, the planning permission has not run out. You have to allow enabling works to do it. It's just as a matter for you. We do intend to develop that, but you'll appreciate hospitality industries, it's suffering at the moment, and we've got to find the money to actually do that. Chris made the point that we wouldn't be breaching the licence if people actually drink in the yellow area as it stands. No, we wouldn't, but we would breach our licence if in any way we are encouraging people to drink in that area, because that's the condition we've offered. And the one thing we do want, the proviso that we've put in our conditions, is we won't encourage people to drink in that area. There are signs up, there's rope up. But if somebody wants to celebrate and raise a glass for a photograph or a wedding, we would want them to be able to take their alcohol into that area. So that is an important exception to make as well, councillors, which is why I say my condition that I put forward is more appropriate. Mr. Mayor mentioned that we could be playing music every weekend in the garden. That's got nothing to do with off sales, councillors, and we don't. And Chris has referred you on page 96 to this buffer area and to the L-shaped driveway from the decision in 2018. But it's important to note that this decision was around the number of events that may take place and functions, and concerns, quite rightly at the time, that an application had been made to include that area within the red line. That meant that area would be part of the licensed area. And by the Live Music Act, recorded music could be played in that area. And that was the concern. And that's why, quite purposefully, the application you've got today is just for off sales into that area, not on sales. But even then, as I've said, councillors, we quite voluntarily maintain that buffer, because under the Live Music Act, we could have played amplified live music. We could have played unamplified live music in the yellow area. It's our land. We can do it by law. During the Business and Planning Act with off sales, we could have had people sat out there and done table service to more tables and chairs. We haven't done that, but yet we're painted as a terrible neighbour. But we haven't done any of that, councillors. So we have maintained that buffer, and we will continue to do so. It's important to note as well, in 2018, the Minster objected. It objected to the last application as well, where we extended the hours to 11:30. There's no objection from the Minster to this. Okay, they've seen how we've done it and what we've done. We haven't abused the permissions that are available to us. We're very close to agreement, councillors. We're very close. I would ask that you don't simply allow that access, Ed, for event functions for the reason I've given. I think we're accepting that Chris seems to be happy that we do use it for events functions, and that we use it for the coach house as well. And we're at a differential between whether it's 9 p.m. or 11 p.m. cut off as well, councillors. I'd ask you to bear in mind there is no objection from environmental health. I've given you a freedom of information request that shows there's been one complaint in the last 3 years, and that was about music. So there's been no complaint about us operating, or albeit to a limited extent, by using the off-sales provisions that have been available to us. I can see that Chris is itching to say something. So once he's had his say, I might have to come back on what Chris has got to say.
Just very briefly, I appreciate this is summing up, and Mr. Jonathan's talked about access not just being limited to events, but also for infirm access, for want of a better word. It would just on a practical point of view, as somebody from the hotel is going to have to unlock a padlock gate, it would seem obtuse that they wouldn't then carry a drink for the person across that area down the steps who is infirm. I think a very simple and clean solution would be to limit it to events. And of course, then if you were in need of assistance, you're going to have the gate unpadlocked. And I'm sure the applicant staff, I'm positive, would gladly carry the drink across that area. Again, which would not be in conflict with the application. So we would just, I just wanted to cover that point, why we wouldn't agree with the either or point. It's maybe seeing that we're talking about angels on the head of a needle now.
I can't say any more councillors. I don't want to in any way, though, have Mr. Moan coming back saying you were using that gate and it wasn't an event or function, or throwing something back at us like that, councillors. It's just open to interpretation, councillors. I would prefer to leave it, and you have on record what I've said to you as to when that gate will be used, councillors, and that's recorded, I think, and it'll be in the minutes, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you all. Councillors, anything else for clarification?
Yeah, I was thinking about that bit, that if I was walking down that thing and got difficult steps to negotiate, even because there is steps down a bit to the thing, I wouldn't want to be holding my drink because I'd be spilling it. So that's why I was saying, would someone be there to, a member of the waiting staff to help, and could that be built in?
We typically would open the gates and let them go through. They may have somebody with them, I suspect, who's helping them, will probably carry their drink for them.
They would if they have a dog as well.
Oh, dogs as well. Oh, yeah, dogs can't go into the hotel, so that's another problem. Council, it's a difficult one. I think there are some unique circumstances that we would use it, and I'd rather you basically trust us to do what we say we'll do, councillors. And to stress, we will not encourage, and we cannot encourage anybody to drink on that driveway.
Sorry, John, no. Just a clarification, we're not seeking to limit people moving across that, just the off-sale permission across that area to events. People moving across for all of these other reasons are already permitted. It'd be unreasonable to try and limit that. It's just the off-sale element. Sorry, John.
Any
what you said.
clarification? Right. Thank you all very much. We're all happy on this side. We shall now close for us to deliberate. As I say, you're happy to go downstairs and wait, or wherever Reese wants to take you, or Leslie. I'm sure you have. Leslie can get you anywhere. Thank you. We'll close the meeting for now. Welcome back, everybody. Please know we have reached a decision. And the decision of the committee is that we will approve the application as put forward on page 31 with some amendments. Condition 9 of the existing licence will be removed, as you both mentioned, and the 2 suggested amendments will be added on, which is for the camera, because they wouldn't see the piece of paper. No furniture of any kind, including benches, will be placed on the driveway marked in yellow on the plan attached to the premises licence, and signage shall be placed within the bedrooms in the coach house once these bedrooms are occupied by guests of the hotel, which advises guests that they must not consume alcohol taken from the coach house on the driveway marked in yellow on the plan attached to this premises. The decision will be, this letter will be sent out as soon as possible. Obviously, Mr. Murray, if he wants to review at any point in the future, can do. That's the decision committee, and the meeting is ended. Thank you for your time today.